Hello, and welcome to the Believe Show. Hello, and welcome to the Believe Show. I am thrilled that today we have our guest with us, Pete Hartigan. Hi, Pete.
Hi, Senya.
Let me tell people a few things about you, and then we'll get started. I'm jumping at the seams to get started with you today. Pete is a classmate from Stanford from our GSB, our MBA program. And Pete's career is all about engaging and focusing on the values economy, which he'll share with me. Pete and I have had some conversations recently in which he gave this analogy of Picasso and Cubism. And I just said, Pete, oh my gosh, you have to come on the show and tell us all about this because it's awesome. I hate to prequel it for you, but it's pretty cool. Hi, Pete. Really good to see you.
It's great to see you.
Given it's the Believe Show, we'll start with the first question. Pete, what is it that you believe that others in your field may not agree with you about?
The field I've been in the last 30 years is business. And the general maximum of business is the purpose of business is to maximize shareholder profit. And the truth is, at some core level, I just don't believe that. I'm a realist. I mean, there's a lot of business out there which that's the case. So the thing I believe is I think the purpose of business is to help a community and maximize profit. So second, as an example of that, if you look at a company like Uber, a lot of people just have the app and use the app. But when I talk about Uber with one of my dear friends, Sinclair, who's an African-American 50-year-old in his 50s, he said, Uber is actually an anti-racist device. And I said, what do you mean by that? And he says, well, when I'm a black man in New York walking around with my girlfriend at the time, he's married now, and he says, I'm coming out of the theater and I would hail a cab. No one used to pick him up. And he was humiliated and he was embarrassed. But with Uber, which is, the mobile app, what happens is there's a reputation embedded in it, both for the driver and for him. And he always gets picked up, in order for that person to get 5 stars. And so that's a good example of where you can embed purpose and community while a company makes a lot of money if you have the right product. And the third point I make on that is just more historical context. If you look back at most of time, I call it era one. For most of time, the purpose of business was to help a community. So Senya, if you and I were living in a small town 400 years ago, everyone would have a role. You'd be the doctor, I'd be the shopkeeper, someone would be the banker. And the truth is, if I'm the town diabetic and you're the shopkeeper and you give me sugar, my wife will walk in and say, Senya, what the heck? It just won't happen because in a small town, social and community is greater than profit, and everyone has a role. Now, in 1945 to the present, definitely, since 1970 with Milton Friedman, the theme of business became maximize shareholder profit, because as companies scaled, they dislocated from responsibility to a community, and by doing that, they can maximize profit and scale in such a way where they scale by hurting people, right? And so you could, if you create an opaque, transparent, a non-transparent environment, you can actually maximize profit, but you're usually hurting people to do it to maximize profit. So what I believe that most people don't believe is that we're in an era now, what I call era 3, where we can build companies of tremendous scale, where you actually win by helping a community in a transparent environment.
So if I understand you right, era 1 was when you were the shopkeeper and I was the doctor and everybody knew each other. Era 2 is when companies started building things that they may not know how that there's an adverse effect on somebody in some community. They may not even know. Is that what you're saying era 2 is?
Yeah, I think it's quite deliberate, frankly. I actually think if you can maximize profit, you're doing it by not taking social responsibility, and there's a cost to it. right? And you end up with climate change. It ends up with Wells Fargo issues with sales. You end up with lots of different things that you wouldn't have if you had what's called the behavioral norms of the small town. The behavioral norms of small town, meaning your behavior has you're directly accountable to your actions directly, and it's intergenerational. And and the companies today, a lot of them are disconnected from that. But what I believe, again, is the values economy, where you start attaching the behavioral norms of the small town inside the unit cost economics of a business. Again, a lot like Uber, because all Uber did is it basically took someone's reputation and behavior, embedded in the app, and you got better behavior, and you have a great app, and people have a good experience. That's the values economy.
But would you also say that Uber has a goal to be profitable, to be maximize profit?
Uber is very profitable. So, I mean, yeah. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I'm not even sure if Uber's profitable, but it's created, $70-80 billion of market cap. So it's created value to people who own the shares in the public market.
Right.
Whether it's profitable or not is actually a different question for a different show.
Okay, so I think I understand what you believe is it's not that businesses should maximize profit, but they should maximize profit with a focus on something like purpose or how they're serving the community. Is that right?
Well, I'm a realist, so I believe that business exists. I'm just on a mission with the values economy to compete, to systematically compete in each of these markets. Because what I believe in era one is I believe in what I call the female archetype. It's highly relational environment. And the male archetype, I call archetype. I call it, highly transactional. Mm-hmm. But what I really want is I want a highly transactional environment that wins like a chessboard in the market with the relational. So what happens is what Uber has done is put the relational element inside the unit cost economics. So it's a business. It's 100% for business. It's 100% for profit, but it wins by the design. That's the magic, and that's what's happening now, and that's the core of the values economy.
So is it true then that lots of businesses that are for profit, they can be for profit, but also do tons of good?
Yeah, I mean, I can give other examples. Not all Fortune 500s. So for example, I've been working on this thesis for 10 years, and if you look at a market like retail, you can really segment the Fortune 500 into companies like Costco versus Walmart. But there's a reason why. Walmart, when it comes out, let's say with a super hot, CD or something, it'll maximize profit, right? So it'll go up to like 30% variable profit, and it'll sweep the margin off the market. Costco doesn't do that. It actually has what's a cost plus 12% policy, because it makes its money on the membership. So what happens is Costco is actually a community membership company, the $60 or $120 you pay, and everyone knows it. So if you go to Costco 3 times or something, you're making a lot of money because they're not trying to maximize, they're trying to give you a benefit, and people intuitively know that. And it's the same thing in finance with something like Northwest Mutual, where the community is the owner versus a bank where they're not. So there's a few designs at scale in industries like retail and finance that have scale, but most of the Fortune 500 scales by exploiting people, exploiting the community. It's to maximize shareholder profit.
Most of it, you believe?
Yeah, I think it's unstable, actually.
And how did you come to these beliefs that, look, it shouldn't just be about maximizing profit, but it should also be about other things as well?
Well, that's a very thoughtful question. And I'm really grateful you asked, Senya. I mean, there's this writer named Stephen Covey, and he's got all these habits that are, to be successful or whatever. But the second one is begin with the end in mind. And so if you're comfortable putting up the slides I presented, or screen sharing, the idea, go to the title slide, the first one. So what I did 10 years ago is I started to build a framework. I'm not sure if there is. I started to build a framework that I call Finding Your Cubism. And the idea here in the picture is, this is in the spirit of just talking about your career, my career, Senya, but anyone on listening's career. It's like when most of us start in our career, we do what everyone does. You get a resume, you try to, figure it out. But I truly believe each person is an original. And this little picture, with the arrow is really a picture of Picasso's Cubism. And the question is, I think each of us are as original as Picasso, but how do you go from entering, the economy with a normal resume to flourishing with your unique style? If you go to the second slide, what I did is I built, sort of a couple frameworks I wanted to share today in case it's helpful, for other people. But this is what I did 10 years ago, and then how I've executed to it. So my mind tends to work with comparables, and I'm going to talk about three, and then ideally, each person can be the fourth for themselves, or if I can help you, or Sandy, you can help them. But the three comparables, the three comps are going to be Pablo Picasso, Steve Jobs, and I'll use myself since I put myself through it. But basically, three people who are original, and then there's 7.8 billion people, so we can do it 7.8 billion times. Now, in this case, this picture is showing, here's Pablo Picasso in the corner, and what you have is Picasso, like any artist starting his career, started with figurative art. And most people don't know that. It's really beautiful. I mean, look how exact the first picture is. And look at the next ones. They get slightly more expressionistic. But you can absolutely understand what those pictures are because he was an artist during his career, just like anyone. But that is not his style. Like when he was 80 years old, looking back, like he could do that because he was a great artist. But actually, you can see in the inflection point along his career timeline, his art started to go in, become the second, the fourth painting, the fifth painting, the sixth sculpture there. What started to actualize out of Picasso was truly the imprint that was probably in him, from birth, was Cubism. And so the idea is each of us are really born, we were brought into the market with whatever industry we do. And for most of us, we act like everyone else. But the truth is, inside of each of us is an original style. And the question is, what is your Cubism? So, and for Picasso, it's literally Cubism. But if you go to the next slide, I apply this to Steve Jobs. And one of the reasons I like applying it to Steve Jobs is, almost everyone knows who Steve Jobs is. And, most people think of him as the Mozart of business, like the absolute genius, the peak of the peak. But actually, along the way, he failed. And I wanted to kind of break down, I mean, he's human, but I want to break down his journey. So if depending on where each of us or you, whoever's listening, wherever you are in your journey, you can realize, gosh, if Steve Jobs can go through his arc, I can go through my arc and end up, really fully actualized. Well, what did Steve Jobs do? Number one, I didn't know him, so this is my assessment. But number one, he was an orphan, so there's some deep imprint of self-assessment, that establishes his dynamic. His Cubism was set, and what I mean by that, by being an orphan, the best that I could say is he really couldn't discount himself. It just wasn't going to happen. So at age 20, he starts talking with Steve Wozniak with that super cool old picture. They start meddling around with technology, and by in 76 they open Apple, and 77 they get the first computer. Well, within 5 years he's 25 and he goes IPO. He's the top of the world. Well, it turns out his career arced down after that, and one of the main reasons why is because Apple Computer and Microsoft at the time, their customers were business to business. They're selling to CIOs. One unique thing about a CIO is CIOs demand a discount. But if you're discounting, you have to be able, to discount yourself, especially for Steve Jobs, because the products are a manifestation of his personality, right? This was his Cubism. Apple was his painting. So he got fired wholesale. Right. So in age 30, there's the bottom of the curve. Steve Jobs, who we all know is brilliant, got fired. And then he did Next, and Next did the same mistake. Again, he built a business selling to business, didn't work. But magically, in 1995, he actually invested in Pixar in 86. But 9 years later, he truly found consumer and distribution with Disney. And age 40, he found business to consumer. And all of a sudden, his personality harmonized. So if you look above at the sinusoidal waves, and saying, if you can point to it, the little green line, if you look at the little green line when it's going down, that's Steve Jobs' personality. What happens is the market either detracts from his personality or harmonizes it. So when he was in the wrong market, B2B, he actually amplified down and got fired. But when you took the exact same person, Steve Jobs, whose personality as an orphan demanded a premium, and he put him in consumer because consumers love a premium. If it's a great product, it amplified up, and he became the best business person of all time. And so, you look at Apple today, and it's almost worth $2 trillion. When he started the second time around, it was worth $5 billion.
Yeah.
And anyway, but what he found is iTunes, consumer, right? iPhone, consumer. So it's an example for each of us. If we can understand our nature, Senya, your nature, listeners, your nature, and then harmonize like a marriage to a market. So the markets I'm not saying are good or bad. It's harmonizing to the market that matches your nature. So for Picasso, it ended up being Cubism. For Steve Jobs, is B2C. But I think that that's the journey for each of us, is to understand ourselves, harmonize to the market and the CEO that it makes you feel actualized, heard, listened to, respected, and just feel joy in your career. So if you go to the next slide.
Yeah.
Then the question is like, okay, how do you actually do it? Like, what's the process? And so, look, there's probably lots of processes, but, building off of the metaphor I actually used, so this is like now pretend we're in like an artist studio, and this is your color palette, just like third grade. It's like, what are your primary colors? What's your yellow? What's your blue? And what's your red? And, you get your best friends and you start talking about it, and you talk through. So for me, like, again, I'm just using an example, I grew up in Chicago, outside Chicago, and I went to a Jesuit high school, and, it resonated with me. I really liked the concept of a servant leader. I just like it. So all of a sudden my color yellow is resonating. Then I go to Duke and I sing in a chapel choir for 4 years. I sing in a modern black mass choir for a while. And again, it's like service work, and I like it. So my color yellow started to show. But I get into business, and just like Picasso starting, I go into business in high-tech venture capital in Boston, and there's no real purpose there. The purpose there is profit. And I felt like a fish out of water, actually. But what I learned over the last almost 30 years now is, and going to Stanford Business School, where you and I met, Senya, and what I started to realize is I like the scale and discipline of a profit environment. So all of a sudden I realized, that actually is a blue color. So I like purpose, but I like the discipline and scale of profit. So it's sort of like maximizing mission, for me at least, can be optimized by maximizing margin if I could find the right model. And so then I became an entrepreneur, and I helped start a company called SoFi. There's 4 founders, and of which I'm not one, but I helped them pre-incorporation all the way to be on the board now. And it's worth, $6 billion. But what we did with SoFi, it stands for social finance, is I was manifesting the power of digital, like we talked about Uber earlier, and in such a way where we're trying to build in the unit cost economics inside the environment of a bank or challenger bank, how to build a community. I was a chief community officer, how to build a community where helping people is how you make more money. So it really was like trying to reinvent banking. Now, what was in my mind back in 2011 when we started that, even till now, I was not trying to become, the best banker in the world. What I was trying to do was produce an example of the values economy. And so I view like finance is a huge industry, for society. I was like, okay, let's build an example of a values economy. So if I thought what was going to happen, I still do, there'd be a mitosis to the economy. So the current economy would keep maximizing profit, but I wanted to have a second economy form or identify what's out there, one in which, maximizes profit by helping people and let them compete. And see, and then consumers can decide which they want. And there's many entrepreneurs that do this. So to some extent, I'm just trying to identify what's already happening and help fuel the fire. But when I look at the Fortune 500, I view them like assembly lines. There's fintech, health tech, gov tech, ed tech, clean tech. I mean, I could go on and on and on. And the entire economy in my mind is turning over. and the female archetypes getting embedded in the unit cost economics. Anyway, so that's my cubism, where I say, oh my gosh, after 10 years of working on this from 2010 to 2020, I'm like, well, my colors are yellow, blue, and red. And my paintings, if you will, are SoFi and Happify. And look, the CEOs and teams running it are the generals of the values economy. I'm like a cheerleader on the side, like with my pom-poms, but it's like, but they're real. And there's massive market cap happening and tremendous value. You know, again, I was not a part of Uber, but they've produced a lot of value. And you could go down with, at this point, probably hundreds of companies that are now part of this values economy, at least as I think of it, competing in the market. And then I think if each of us, you know, spend time with your friends to figure out, well, what are my three primary colors? And then you start looking at your career and you start saying, wow, those are your paintings. Why did you do them? What did you like and not like? It starts to tether in, you know, your unique colors. And then your career ends up being a series of paintings. But if it starts to hit that inflection point where you're like, wow, I'm not doing figurative art anymore, my true original self is starting to come out, I think there'll be tremendous joy, you know, and the more joy people feel around their career, you know, I don't know. I just think that's a wonderful outcome.
So let me share a few comments that people are sharing and then lead that into a question. So first of all, Sabah says, Pete, you're an incredible human being, and it's such fun to hear about this idea of yours. Thank you for sharing. And Lisa says, love the slides, Pete. Very well thought out. And then Carla says, and this leads to a question. She says she loves that each person is an original. I totally second that, Carla. And she says she loves how can you flourish with your unique style. So Pete, my question to you, one of the things that I've observed about you as a person, and I'm going to a little bit, maybe even make you blush, but just to share with our audience, Pete got the Arbuckle Award in our class, in our MBA class. And that's for basically the best person. But let me say specifically what it's for. It's for the person who cares about his classmates. Let me describe it that way. And what I want to share from personal experience is when you're talking to Pete, he's all in and he's just talking and he's trying to figure out what works for you. So my question to you, given this comment of Carla's, is how do you, when you're speaking, even with an individual, how can you help them find out how they can flourish with their unique style?
You know, so we had about 364 people in our business school class in '99. What I tried to do, this is what I did. You know, I took the little physical book we had and I just check marked through it, and I tried to meet everybody, which is harder than you might think, actually. And then I wanted to meet them, each person on their terms. I call it each person's creative core. So one of my favorite people, you know, back then was Ken Shiba. So Ken, in class was wicked smart, brilliant engineer, electrical engineer from Japan. And from the outside, when I was first interacting, listening to this brilliant person, I was saying, oh, there's an engineer, super smart, but actually when I just asked him, I said, hey, Ken, I said, what do you love? What do you love? And he said, oh, I love art. I was like, really? And so what we did a few months later is Ken sort of became the CEO of a GSB art show. And what I was interested in is I love to interact with each person around their creative core. And in this case with Ken, who's such a great person, I wanted everyone else to be able to see, this is what I was feeling. I want everyone else to see this incredible side of him as an artist, and then all of a sudden, and so I did more like back end infrastructure with him, and maybe some is just emotional encouragement, just so people feel listened to. And then it happened, and all of a sudden, like, you saw it. I mean, he did the art show, and we saw then art not just from him but everyone else, and for me, that just was pure joy. Just seeing, but that was a great example of cubism, because everybody
literally, in a sense.
Well, a lot of people were probably looking at Ken as a brilliant math engineer, right? But that was figurative art. Now he still does that, and but inside was this incredible other. And by the way, what was in my head as I said, if when I was going through that checklist, I'm like, wow, like if I were the admissions officer, there's going to be 3 or 4 tremendous things that no one's ever going to want to say. So in every interaction I was having that was of this type, that's what I was politely probing for, because that's someone's creative core where, people are humble. They're not going to say it. But if you get that creative core and build around that, then all of a sudden the biggest time, which is normally, the biggest bottleneck is normally time, switches. Because if you're dealing with someone's creative core, they actually give you infinite time, because it's no longer about you, right? And it's about them. But I feel good about that.
I'm sorry, I second what you say about Ken Chiba. He started our year, the Arts, Media, and Entertainment Club. And since then, since 99, it's been going at the GSB with a huge conference every year with humongous speakers. I mean, that definitely is his passion.
So I would just try to do that someone might be really into their Southeast Asian affinity culture, but I would go and I would listen, right? And someone might be into the soccer club, and I would ask about it. I might not go, but I would try to communicate with each person on their creative core. And so to me, the Arbuckle thing more was probably I just listened, and so if people feel heard, I don't know. I think that's all it was. It's just trying to help actualize that side of them, or her. And anyway, that's my lens of the Arbuckle. I just think it's like the class's response to the listener.
Yeah. We have a question for you. I will put this on the screen while we have it. So when you are speaking about these 3 circles, Carla asks, do you think the yellow, blue, and red, do you think another way of looking at that is it's what I love doing plus what I do well plus what the world needs? What do you think, Pete?
Well, I think that's brilliant. The way I'd react, let's use Carla as if I'm talking to everyone on the call. So what I would say is her natural framework of those 3 buckets is the start to her colors, right? So everyone's colors can be extremely different. The colors are primary colors, but we put into them. So if that's how Carla sees the palette, I would say, well, let's put those as your 3. Now let's talk about, your life and what examples. And then you just sort of, it's like trading. It's like, oh, okay, well, that's it. Oh, this is better, to a point where Carla would actually say, wow, those are my 3 components. And then what happens off of that is there's a middle of the 3, and that's her cubism, right? And so if you were to put her question up again, please. And it's like, okay, what do I love doing, right? So that could be like her yellow could be passion, right? Or love. What do I do well? Maybe blue is competency and skills. And what does the world, need? And maybe that's utilitarian, right? And so I might throw those keywords out. I'm not the best wordsmither, but what I find, if I just be a mirror to what she just said, then she'll come back with the words that actually matter to her. Mm-hmm. And then you write them down. And then what happens is you sleep on that, and now you have the palette forming. And then you start saying, this is really fun. Then you start saying, okay, what have you done in your career? And it's like, boom, that's a painting. And all of a sudden, after a half hour, you got 30 or 40 examples. And then you start saying, and then all of a sudden, Carla starts saying, wow, these 4 are the ones that I really mean. And now you got her style, mm-hmm. right? At that point, now you're grasping, and then she's off. She doesn't need me anymore, right? Mm-hmm. It's the same thing like with my wife, Vanessa. It's like she's got some really great best girlfriends. And when she circles around with them in that way, it's the honesty of the feedback, right, is so wonderful and beautiful. But what this provides is a framework, right? Yep. And there's many frameworks, but this is just a simple framework. It's a color palette. It's your primary mm-hmm. colors, right? And so if there is you, Senya, we could have 3 different things. Mm-hmm. If it was Satba, it would be 3 different things. Or there might be the same things. I don't know. But I go out with the framework without any bias toward what are the words, mm-hmm. but I listen. And I put them in and off you go.
I'll just summarize what you said before taking one question that we have here. So what you've said is you've said, hey, come on out, and instead of being your old unoriginal self, find your own cubism. And I just want to point out to everyone who's with us today that Pete's mom is an artist, and she was the artist in residence at the Vienna Opera House, and maybe he'll say a little more about that. But after that point of find your own cubism, you gave us this example of Picasso and how he definitely transitioned from more realistic to cubism. Then you gave us this example of Steve Jobs. And also when you gave this example, you added this other idea of harmonization. Find where you harmonize. So for Steve Jobs, the distinction was B2B versus B2C, with him being B2C. But for us, it might be something else. It might not, right, Pete? Not necessarily that. And then I actually really love, and I'm so glad that you came to us with this, here's mine, like here's the Pete version, and here's what I've done SoFi. Do you try to get every company to end with a fi, SoFi, Happify? But giving us,
as long as it helps people and make money, you can call it whatever you want.
So speaking of helping people make money, here's a question that we have. You've given a little bit of context to how an individual can flourish with just listening, keeping asking about their core creativity. Here's a question from Sean Doyle, and he asks, Pete, practically, how do you apply this with businesses at the corporate level? So you've talked a little about the individual level, but how can you apply this at the business and corporate level?
Well, Sean, actually, I really appreciate that. There's a few ways to answer. You know, if you take a company like SoFi, it's being run by Anthony Noto, and I am a huge supporter of this business leader. And you know, and one of the things that I've learned from him, he went to West Point, and he's deeply interested in values, and he's got 9 values, and he's really serious about them. And so I think, you know. I think if Sean, if you're the leader in a company or you're following a leader, again, I try to be agnostic to, you know, who's your match in a market. But if, for example, values is a match, then Anthony's a great match. So if you know, so I think the journey, you know, can be. So I think there's 2 layers. Are you going to create a company? Are you going to actually create your paintings, or are you going to join a company? And either or is fine. You know, but if you're joining a company, I think, again, it's like marriage, and it's searching for a CEO. It's assessing yourself first and your color palette, and then it's searching for a CEO that matches your values. And sometimes it's really easy. It can literally be the product, but you can have a product that matches your values, but a CEO that really doesn't, and a culture that doesn't, and it sucks, right? You know, it's like a really bad marriage. So I think on your career journey, because you only have the one life, is. Well, I mean, most people think, you know, but I shouldn't say that even, but it's just like, it's like on this life, you know, what you have is I think it's just how quickly you can self-assess and find the CEO that you harmonize with and the company and culture you harmonize with. And then you get the virtuous loop. Now, secondly, if you're starting a company, if you're actually building one, that's like when I helped start SoFi. So in that case, you really look at the core unit cost economics. And or let's say, just since everyone knows Uber, you'd sit there and say, wow, I want to invent a product. I have no idea if this was with intent or not, but I want to invent a product where actually by putting social and behavioral norms, you know, that are repeat again, that people behave better and we make more money. So if you're inventing a company and that's what's happened, right, it's extraordinary, right? And then if you add on a CEO, or you become the CEO of that, then you're fully aligned. You're like, wow, I know my interests I want in business. I found the company or built the company structure, and then manifesting all the way to customer. That's joy. I mean, I think that's the journey. You feel it's like potential energy to kinetic. You feel fully actualized, heard, and then hopefully, Sean, happy.
Pete, thank you so much for being here with us today. We have 2 questions. Let me follow up with 2 people who you've given answers to. So first of all, Sean, he says, thank you. He's on the executive team of a company, and they just brought in a new CEO. So lots of opportunity. Thanks, Sean. And then Carla came back with, actually, the 3 are passion, love, her superpowers, and what helps serves others.
I mean, you know, quoting one of my most favorite people, Asaba, that right there is a sacred space. Carla, that's awesome. We can talk about that, Carla, because there's a lot of magic to your color palette.
The two questions we usually end on are, Pete, if people have been with us today, what is a thought that you would like people to take away from our conversation today?
You're original. There's 7.8 billion people and you're one of them. You're an absolute original. And the more we can draw out your unique talents and then match it to a market and CEO, or you become that CEO in the context of business, hopefully the happier you feel.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And if you could snap your fingers and almost everyone in the world, just like that, exactly, and almost everyone in the world were to take an action, what action would you want that to be?
If I could snap my fingers, I'd want the values economy. I would want 7.8 billion people to have full access and attainment to the values economy. And that would help close the wealth gap that I think that digital transformation is accelerating with orders of magnitude. And I'm 10 years into my values economy thesis. And if I'm lucky enough to live the next 30, this is all I'm going to be focusing on is how can I help, put a product into the market that gives 7.8 billion people access and attainment, to modern wealth. And whether you're like my wife who grew up in Liberia, Africa, or my friends in Iowa or Singapore, I want everyone to have access to the modern economy, the values economy, and that's what my snap would be. I think the wealth gap can be closed, but we need to put product in place so people can get access to digital digital wealth creation.
So what is that vision? If people did have total access to the values economy, what would that look like?
Well, I tell you exactly what it would be. It would be era one of business, where the purpose of business is to help a community scaling at a global scale, like the second era of business. But the winners of that market will be a whole series of companies that helping a community, is how you win in the market. And if that happens, I think you solve fundamentally, like a unifying theory, you solve fundamentally issues like climate change and exploitation with banking against low-income people. I mean, I could go through every market. Those problems exist because of a dislocation from helping a community. It would not happen with the behavioral norm of the small town. My lens is just put a product in place to close that, so that people are directly accountable for their actions. And so if you're really good actions, you'll get really wonderful, community NPS score. And if you're a jerk, that's fine. You're just going to have costs for it.
So basically, you're saying go forward and do those actions that are good actions in the world.
Go forward and do whatever actions you want. But I want society to have I want you to be directly accountable for your actions. So if you're spewing out, smoke into the atmosphere, there's a cost to it. Right now, though, it's not directly connected back to you. The values economy, with everyone's got a supercomputer in their pocket with a mobile phone. That when you take that assumption that everyone's tethered, you actually have near zero marginal cost of access to once distribution happens to everyone on the planet. You're accountable. Mm-hmm. So that's my main assumption from 2010 is like everyone's going to be accountable to their actions, and when you do it, you can get the behavior norms of the small town, the female archetype, right into the core of the economy, the values economy, and we can produce economy that actually is for profit. But again, it's philosophical to me. The purpose of business is to help a community and maximize profit, right? It's in my view, and that's the silent war I'm on. And I think once we create that A/B test, I think society will pick the latter, and then you compete. And I'm all for competing. So let game on, and I hope everyone joins.
Thank you so much. We've been here with Pete Hartigan. Thank you so much. What a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I'm deeply grateful to you and everyone on the call. And it's an honor. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. All the best, everyone.